There is something so deeply rich about presence. The first time I ever did an embodied presence exercise was in embodied flow yoga teacher training, whereby we had to be with each other and we engaged in non-dual eye gaze. And there were two practices. The first one was, as we looked at our partner, we sent across the message, I can fix you. And the second one was, I see you in your wholeness. The difference between the two energetically was, there's no words for it. It's huge. It's hugely significant. And when I first came across the term mother hunger, I realized it was that. It's a hunger, a deep hunger for presence. Definitely more than that, but at the very root of it, it's a desperate hunger for presence. And I believe it was Mary Stark Whitehouse who said that all a soul really wants is to be witnessed as it is, to be seen as it is. And similarly for our inner child, for ourselves, that's all we really want and really need. Not to be filtered, not to be edited, not to be changed, or to be like someone else, or to be compared to where a bar would be, like a standard. But to just be honored, recognized and witnessed as they are, as we are, as I am, as you are. And for me, I think that is what was most profoundly healing when I started my journey with my therapist all those years ago. It was a medicine that I had no idea I needed. And I remember one of the most transformational sessions was when I went in with material that I thought she was going to fire me for as her client. I think I felt so much repulsion and disgust for myself that of course I would project it onto her, and I was shaking. I was on a bus to her office and I was shaking the whole way because I knew that I had to speak about this. And usually that's the case. If there is something that wants to be seen, it will find a way to be seen, and there wouldn't be any other content that would emerge. All other content would lead back to this if it's desperately wanting to be seen. So I went in to her office and I did try to evade it. I talked about a bunch of other stuff, but it was clear, like the energy in the room was just dense with the elephant that I was not speaking about until and I know she sensed it because she asked a really random question that led straight there. And it was so healing for me to share what it was that was wanting to be shared with so much shame and so much guilt. And she just held space. It was just non-judgmental, compassionate space holding. No bias whatsoever towards situation towards me, but neutral, kind space holding. And I think that was the moment whereby I was like, oh my God, this really should be accessible for everyone. Every human should have access to a witness that has a capacity to hold whatever it is, like that they can hold, which is so different from speaking with a friend, or with your partner or family, because well, there are opinions, and as friends, as partners, there is no contract of a neutral space holding, and there is something about that is so profoundly medicinal in me accepting me, because it's looking at myself through the mirror of my therapist that was so clear that I was able to see me with that clarity too. And instead of judging the deed, it is to be curious about what led up to it. So I'm realizing now about mother hunger, and this term that was coined by Kelly MacDonald. The first time I heard it, it really clicked. Like, with that book, she filled such a huge gap in the market of inner child work, for me at least. And she writes about how every daughter, she specializes, or she writes specifically about the mother-daughter relationship. So she writes about how every daughter needs guidance, nurturance, and protection from her mom. Guidance comes later, during the later years, but the very early formative years, every daughter needs protection and nurturance from her mom. And if the daughter didn't receive any of these three, there would be a void, which she calls mother hunger. And we do what we need to do to seek wholeness. As humans, we just naturally do that. If we're hungry, we reach for food. If we are lonely, we can reach for company. There is a survival instinct within us for us to get outside of ourselves, to get ourselves what we need. Most of the time, unless of course we have been paralyzed or frozen, whereby we reach a point whereby we can't even fulfill our own needs, or we have no idea what our needs are. But if we do, this is what we would do naturally to fulfill our needs. So looking outside of ourselves to be held, to be protected, to feel loved, to feel seen, to be witnessed, is so normal. It's so normal. I feel like it's been judged or shamed, because we already know this, like what we want from others, we first have to give it to ourselves. We know this, yet at the same time, there is something very primal within us that seeks this need externally, and of course, because it's tangible, and sometimes when we haven't built a capacity or depth of trusting of ourselves, it's easier to depend on others for that, whatever it is, validation, approval, love, belonging. And it takes real hard work for us to cultivate and develop every day, like consistently, the capacity for ourselves to witness ourselves, to be present to ourselves, and to develop this to get this need met by ourselves. And that's where I believe, like, internalization of an experience is always so important. So the experience doesn't live just outside of us, but when we are in the experience of receiving love, wherever it's coming from, to internalize it, to really feel it, and to repeat it again to ourselves, to affirm it, because now we know the feeling, and for me, this is how slowly it's offering myself what I've been seeking from the outside. So it's still very much work in progress, but I would say that the capacity to hold, the capacity for presence, and the capacity to be in discomfort, and of listening to what is the need that is now asking for attention, has been a lot stronger, just simply from the consistency of showing up, and even on days when I don't feel like it, to pick myself back again whenever I next feel better, and to really shame of the process, shame of the journey, shame whenever our growth or our external circumstance doesn't seem to show anything about our growth. Like it feels like, I'm back in at like square zero. It looks like I've got no work. I haven't done any work at all. But to recognize that our journeys are not linear. They follow the curves and the meanders of nature and cycles, her cycles. So it's cyclical, it spirals. It's a feminine way of healing. And I feel like that is a gift that I received from somatics.